When my daughter-in-law told me I was no longer needed in my son's life, I smiled. Not because it did not hurt, but because I did not want her to see me break. We were standing in the kitchen. The evening light was soft, almost golden. The kettle was still warm, but no one touched the tea. She did not raise her voice. She did not use harsh words. She said it calmly, like someone stating a simple fact. "You should go live somewhere else," she said. "He has his own family now." I remember nodding slowly. I remember saying, "Of course." And I remember how quiet the house felt after that. That night, I lay awake in my small room. I stared at the ceiling fan turning again and again. My heart felt heavy, but my eyes stayed dry. I kept thinking about my son, the boy I carried, the boy I raised alone after his father passed. How did we come here? How did love slowly turn into distance? This is my story. I am not a dramatic woman. I have lived a simple life. Most of my days were spent cooking, cleaning, and praying quietly. My husband died when my son was only 9 years old. Suddenly, the house felt too big and too silent. I learned how to be strong because I had no other choice. My son became my world. Every meal I cooked was for him. Every prayer I made included his name. I worked small jobs. I stitched clothes for neighbors. Sometimes I cleaned homes. I never complained. When you love someone, you do not count the cost. My son grew up kind and gentle. He respected elders. He used to hold my hand when crossing the road. At night, we ate dinner together, just the two of us. He would tell me about school while I listened like it was the most important story in the world. Those years were not easy, but they were full of love. And love makes hard days feel lighter. When my son told me he wanted to marry, I was happy, truly happy. I believed marriage adds to a family. I believed love multiplies, not replaces. His wife was polite at first. She smiled often. She spoke softly when others were around. I welcomed her into my home. I cooked her favorite dishes after learning what she liked. I gave her my room and moved into the smaller one. I thought that was what good mothers do. On their wedding night, I stood quietly in the corner. I watched my son smile like I had never seen before. I whispered a prayer for their happiness. I did not know that night was the beginning of my loneliness. After the wedding, things changed slowly, not all at once, like a light dimming little by little. At breakfast, they sat together. They spoke in low voices. I sat across from them, smiling, eating quietly. I told myself this was normal. New couples need space. I did not want to interfere. Sometimes, I felt like a guest in my own home. I waited before entering rooms. I spoke less, just to keep peace. My son was still respectful, but he was distracted, always busy, always tired. I told myself not to be needy. A mother should know when to step back. The silences grew longer. Meals became quiet. Laughter slowly left the house. I noticed my daughter-in-law correcting small things I did. How I folded clothes. How I cooked rice. She never said it harshly, but her eyes spoke. I told myself not to take it personally. Everyone has their own way. Still, something inside me felt unsettled, like standing on ground that was slowly cracking. At night, I prayed more. I asked God for patience. I asked for understanding. I never asked for anything for myself. There is a special kind of pain that does not shout. It sits quietly in the chest. It grows heavier each day. I missed my son, even though he lived under the same roof. I missed our conversations. I missed being seen. Once, I waited all evening to talk to him. I wanted to tell him about my doctor visit. But he came home late, tired, and went straight to bed. I stood in the hallway for a long time. Then I went back to my room without saying a word. That night, I realized something important. Loneliness does not always mean being alone. Sometimes, it means being forgotten. The house no longer felt like mine. The walls were the same. The furniture had not changed. But the warmth was gone. I started spending more time in my room. Not because anyone asked me to, but because it felt safer. I did not want to be in the way. I did not want to cause discomfort. A mother learns to disappear quietly. One evening, I overheard my daughter-in-law talking on the phone. She did not know I was nearby. She laughed softly. Then she said something that made my heart pause. "This house will finally feel like ours," she said. I stepped back quietly. I did not want to hear more. That night, I held my son's childhood photo in my hands. I traced his face with my fingers. I wondered when love became something that needed limits. And I wondered how long I would still be allowed to stay. The days after that phone call felt heavier. Nothing had changed on the outside, yet everything inside me felt different. It was as if I had seen a truth I was never meant to hear. I started noticing things more clearly. The way my daughter-in-law sighed when I entered the room. The way conversations stopped when I sat at the table. No one said I was unwanted. Not yet. But silence can speak very loudly. Every morning, I woke up early, as I always had. I swept the floor quietly. I cooked breakfast before anyone else woke up. I did these things out of habit, and also out of hope. Hope that I still mattered. But gratitude slowly disappeared. No one noticed the clean floors. No one asked if I was tired. I told myself not to expect anything. Love should not come with conditions. Still, my heart kept waiting. Sometimes my son would thank me softly. A quick, "Thank you, Amy," before leaving for work. Those words kept me going for the rest of the day. I held on to them like something fragile. In the afternoons, the house stayed quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts. I sat near the window. I watched people pass by. Families, children, laughter drifting in from outside. I wondered if I had failed somewhere. If I had loved too much. If being a good mother meant knowing when to step aside. I had no answers. Only questions that came back to me every evening. When my son returned home, he looked tired. His shoulders seemed heavier than before. I wanted to ask him if he was okay. But I stopped myself. I did not want to burden him. I told myself, tomorrow. Tomorrow became many tomorrows. My daughter-in-law began managing the house her own way. She rearranged cupboards. She changed meal times. I stayed silent. I followed her rules. Once she told me gently, "You don't need to cook every day." I smiled and said, "Of course." But cooking was never just cooking for me. It was how I showed love. When that was taken away, I felt empty. I spent more time alone after that. I read old prayer books. I cleaned things that were already clean. At night, I replayed memories in my mind. My son as a child, running toward me after school. His laughter filling the house. I wondered where that closeness had gone. When my daughter-in-law told me I was no longer needed in my son's life, I smiled. Not because it did not hurt, but because I did not want her to see me break. We were standing in the kitchen. The evening light was soft, almost golden. The kettle was still warm, but no one touched the tea. She did not raise her voice. She did not use harsh words. She said it calmly, like someone stating a simple fact. "You should go live somewhere else," she said. "He has his own family now." I remember nodding slowly. I remember saying, "Of course." And I remember how quiet the house felt after that. That night, I lay awake in my small room. I stared at the ceiling fan turning again and again. My heart felt heavy, but my eyes stayed dry. I kept thinking about my son. The boy I carried. The boy I raised alone after his father passed. How did we come here? How did love slowly turn into distance? This is my story. I am not a dramatic woman. I have lived a simple life. Most of my days were spent cooking, cleaning, and praying quietly. My husband died when my son was only 9 years old. Suddenly, the house felt too big and too silent. I learned how to be strong because I had no other choice. My son became my world. Every meal I cooked was for him. Every prayer I made included his name. I worked small jobs. I stitched clothes for neighbors. Sometimes I cleaned homes. I never complained. When you love someone, you do not count the cost. My son grew up kind and gentle. He respected elders. He used to hold my hand when crossing the road. At night, we ate dinner together, just the two of us. He would tell me about school while I listened like it was the most important story in the world. Those years were not easy, but they were full of love. And love makes hard days feel lighter. Old clothes, photographs, letters from my husband. I packed slowly, one item at a time. Each one carried a memory. Sometimes, I stopped and cried quietly. Not loudly, just enough to release the pain. I did not want anyone to hear. One night, my son saw the bag near my bed. He asked, "Why are you packing?" I smiled softly. "Oh, just organizing," I said. He nodded and walked away. That was when I realized something important. He did not ask where I was going. He did not ask why. Maybe he already knew. Or maybe he did not want to know. The house felt colder after that, even during warm days. I started eating less, sleeping less, speaking less. I became careful with every word, every movement. I did not want to create problems. I did not want to be a reason for discomfort. But the truth is, silence does not protect you. It only makes you disappear faster. One morning, while making tea, my daughter-in-law looked at me. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. She did not say anything then, but something in her expression told me the conversation was coming. I felt my heart sink. I knew I was standing at the edge of something painful. I carried the tea to the table carefully. My hands were shaking slightly. I tried to hide it. That day moved slowly. Each hour felt heavy, like waiting for a storm. I prayed quietly in my room. Not for myself, but for strength. Because deep down, I knew the hardest moment was still ahead. And I was not sure if my heart was ready for it. That morning felt different. The air was heavy, even before anyone spoke. I could feel it in my chest. My daughter-in-law asked me to sit with her after breakfast. Her voice was soft, almost careful. My son was in the other room. I could hear him moving around, getting ready for work. I wished he would stay. We sat across from each other at the small table, the same table where I once fed my son with my own hands. Now it felt unfamiliar. She folded her hands slowly. She took a breath. I waited. "I want to talk openly," she said. "I hope you understand." I nodded. I always nodded. She spoke about respect, about boundaries, about how marriage needs space to grow. Her words were polite, but they landed like stones. Then she said it, slowly, clearly. "He doesn't need his mother the way he used to." I felt something shift inside me. Not break, just move. She continued speaking, about independence, about building a future together. Then came the sentence I will never forget. "You are no longer needed in his life the same way." The room went quiet. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I smiled. A small, tired smile. I said, "I understand." I do not know where that strength came from. Maybe it was years of holding things in. Maybe it was a mother's pride. Inside, my heart felt very old. My son entered the room then. He sensed something was wrong. He looked at both of us. No one explained. No one asked him to sit. I stood up slowly. I said I needed some air. Outside, the sky was cloudy. The wind was gentle. It felt strange how normal the world looked. I stood there for a long time. I thought about my husband. I thought about all the years I gave without asking for anything. I realized something painful. Love is not always remembered. Sometimes it is replaced. That evening, I packed the rest of my things. Carefully, quietly. I folded my clothes neatly. I wrapped old photographs in cloth. Each item felt heavier than it should have. My son came into my room. He saw the bags. He asked, What is this? I looked at him. Really looked at him. His face still had traces of the little boy I raised. But his eyes were different now. I think it's time, I said softly. He frowned. Time for what? I took a deep breath. He was silent. To give you space. I waited for him to stop me. To say something. Anything. He did not. That silence answered every question I had. The next morning, I left early. Before the house fully woke up. I did not want goodbyes. I did not want tears. I placed a note on the kitchen table. Just a few lines. Take care of each other. I am always here if you need me. I walked out quietly. The door closed behind me. I did not look back. I moved into a small rented room near the old market. It was clean. Simple. The first night there was the hardest. The walls were unfamiliar. The silence felt louder. I sat on the bed and held my hands together. I felt empty, but also calm. Days passed, then weeks. My son did not call. Neither did his wife. At first, I waited. Then I stopped waiting. I learned how to live with less. Less noise. Less expectation. I cooked for one. I prayed alone. Some nights, the pain returned. Soft but deep. Other nights, I felt strangely peaceful. I realized I had spent my whole life being needed. Now, I had to learn how to exist without that role. One afternoon, months later, I fell ill. Nothing serious. Just weakness. A neighbor helped me. She sat with me. She listened. She said, "You raised a good son." Sometimes good people forget. Her words stayed with me. Time moved forward quietly. Then, one evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened it slowly. It was my son. He looked tired, older, different. He stood there, unsure. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Amy, can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him in. He stood in the middle of the room, looking around. The space was small. There was not much to see. A narrow bed, a small table, a single chair near the window. I could see it in his eyes. He had not imagined me living like this. He had not imagined me living alone. I asked him to sit. My voice was steady. He sat on the chair, holding his hands together, just like he used to when he was a child and felt nervous. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Silence filled the room. Then he looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "I didn't know it would be like this," he said. I listened. I did not interrupt. He spoke slowly, about how life felt heavy, about how the house felt quiet in a way that did not feel right. He said he thought space would bring peace, but instead, it brought emptiness. I nodded gently. I understood more than he realized. He apologized. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft, broken apology. "I should have said something," he said. "I should have stopped it." I reached out and placed my hand on his. Not to forgive, but to comfort. I told him something simple. I never wanted to be in the way. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. "I forgot," he said quietly. "I forgot how much you gave." Those words stayed in the air between us. He asked why I never called, why I never complained. I smiled gently. "A mother doesn't want to remind her child of guilt," I said. Tears rolled down his face. He did not wipe them away. We sat like that for a long time, two people connected by love and loss. He told me his marriage was struggling, that small resentments had grown into walls. That peace did not come from pushing people away. I listened. I did not judge. I told him I did not blame his wife. Change is hard. Fear makes people protective. He was surprised by my calm. But peace comes when anger leaves. He asked me to come back home, not as before, but as family. I closed my eyes for a moment. I thought carefully. "I will come," I said, "but only if respect lives there." He nodded. "I understand." When I returned to that house, it felt different. Not warmer, just honest. I stayed in my room. I lived quietly. My daughter-in-law avoided me at first. Then one day she spoke. She said she was afraid. Afraid of losing her place. Afraid of being unseen. I listened. I told her I knew that fear. We did not become close, but we learned how to coexist. That was enough. I stopped trying to prove my worth. I stopped shrinking myself. I lived with dignity, with quiet strength. My son changed too. He spoke more. He listened more. Sometimes we drank tea together, in silence. That silence felt peaceful. I learned something important during that time. Love does not mean staying where you are not respected. Love also means knowing when to step back. I was no longer needed, but I was still loved. And that was enough. Life became quieter after that. Not empty, just gentle. I stopped measuring my days by who needed me. I started measuring them by how peaceful I felt. Some mornings, I woke up early and watched the light enter the room. It touched the walls slowly. It reminded me that every day begins again, no matter what happened before. I learned to enjoy small things.
Warmtea.
Fresh air. The sound of birds outside the window. My son visited my room more often. Not because he felt guilty, but because he wanted to. We talked about simple things. Weather, work, old memories. Sometimes he asked questions about his childhood. Things he had forgotten. I told him stories, not to remind him of sacrifice, but to remind him of love. My daughter-in-law remained distant, but respectful. Over time, her words softened. Her eyes lost their sharpness. One evening, she brought me tea. She placed it on the table quietly. She did not say much, but that small gesture said enough. I realized forgiveness does not always arrive as words. Sometimes, it arrives as silence without tension. I no longer waited for approval. I no longer feared being unwanted. I had faced that fear, and it no longer controlled me. There were moments when sadness returned. Memories do not disappear. They visit when they choose. But I did not fight them anymore. I let them pass. I understood something important. Children grow. Their lives change. A mother's place shifts. It does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter. I learned to stand gently in that quiet. If someone listening to my story feels forgotten, I want you to know this. Your worth does not end when others stop needing you. Your value does not depend on your usefulness. Love given freely never becomes meaningless, even when it is not returned the same way. Today, I live with peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because I accepted what I cannot control. I love my son. That will never change. But I also love myself enough now to protect my heart. And that, perhaps, was the lesson life wanted to teach me. Sometimes, being no longer needed is not a loss. It is an invitation to find yourself again.